All right, so we are officially recording now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our WellSense Health Plan sponsored Teaching Kitchen class. Tonight's class is one of my favorite classes to teach this time of the year, and we are doing a fall baking or some fall flavor themed recipes today. We are going to make a caramel apple, and we are going to make a blender pumpkin chocolate chip muffin. Um, One thing I want to highlight is that we're cooking with some seasonal flavors, maple syrup. That's really prominent in the fall as trees are being tapped and the maple syrup is being collected, and pumpkin. We are using canned pumpkin for our recipe today. And I love easy things like blender recipes. So we're gonna make our muffins in a blender. So really nice, simple way to make muffins that you might not have seen before. If you do not have a mini muffin tray, that's okay. I actually got this from Walmart this week and it's a silicone one. So it's really flexible and pliable. And I have found that when I tested this recipe, I just gave it a quick little spray with some oil spray and no little muffin liners or anything like that. And after these cool for about a few minutes in here, they just pop right out. So this is actually a really nice investment, super inexpensive, but if you're someone who loves making muffins and you don't always like using liners, this is really easy to clean and really easy to work with. So shout out to my mini muffin tin. That is going to be the star of today's show. But we are going to kick it off with our muffins so that way they can bake while we make our caramel apples. And I will forewarn you as well, when I tested the recipe for our caramel apples, it's like everything in life, doesn't always go the way I plan. So if our apples are not cooperating, I'm going to show you how to pivot and we're going to make it a dip. Still just as delicious, but we are gonna pivot if we need to. So right off the bat, we're gonna go ahead and start with preparing our flour. You can purchase oat flour at the grocery store. It'll be more expensive because you're paying for them to have prepared it for you, but we're actually gonna make our own oat flour in our blender. So I have about a cup and a half of oats here right into my blender. We're gonna go ahead and blend those before we add everything else. We're gonna blend it so that it's a fine, thin flour. Because it's super loud, I'm gonna go ahead and just mute my mic and I'm gonna pop back behind my counter here and put it on the blender. So I'll be right back. All right, and if you are cooking with me, don't put your blender away. We're going to put the rest of our ingredients in just a moment. But because this is our dry ingredient, we want to put this back in the dish because the blender is going to struggle to really incorporate kicking up that dry flour up with the wet ingredients. It works better when those wet ingredients are near the blade. And this is a blender, meaning the blade is right at the bottom. Really great for making things with lots of liquid. Whereas if you have a food processor, sometimes that blade comes up higher and there's multiple levels. That's really good for chunkier things with less liquid. You can use either in this scenario. I feel that a food processor sometimes is a bit more versatile, but this blender is going to work perfectly for this as well. For this, we are going to add our other dry ingredients. I have a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. If you don't have that, you can use cinnamon. Splash in some nutmeg and or some cloves. Any warming spices really will do. And I have some baking powder and some salt. I'm going to add it into here. Put it to the side here. I'm going to go ahead and add my canned pumpkin. Let's grab a spatula. About a cup of canned pumpkin here. Quick note on our pumpkin. This is your nutrition tip when looking for canned pumpkin. You want to search for the canned that says 100% pure pumpkin. Avoid the ones that say pumpkin pie filling or it doesn't have that 100% pure. Anything with like pumpkin pie filling. those tend to have added sugars in them and spices. So we want to avoid those because we can add our own sweetener for whatever we're using. You can see here on the back that it has 5 grams of sugar, which are naturally occurring from this pumpkin, and 0 grams of added sugar. And if you want to double check the ingredients, it only has pumpkin. So that's what we're searching for here. Just that 100% pure pumpkin. We're going to go in with our dark brown sugar. Brown sugar is actually just regular white sugar with molasses mixed into it. If you do not have any brown sugar, dark brown sugar on hand, you can honestly just do white sugar. That molasses gives it a nice robust flavor. You can also even just add a splash of molasses as well if you don't have that brown sugar. So you have to, use substitutes. You definitely can. We're going to go in with 2 eggs. And finally, we're going to go back in with our flour, wet ingredients. And I have 3 tablespoons of oil here. I have avocado oil. You could use canola. Heck, you could even use olive oil if you want. I usually steer away from using olive oil in baking because it has such a potent flavor. But again, you can work it in here if you want. We are going to, I almost forgot my vanilla bean paste. So if you have a vanilla bean extract imitation, that's when you're going to add it. I just have this squeezy tube of paste. It was on sale at the grocery store. Same thing as the extract. I like to measure vanilla with my eyeballs. Just a little squirt, roughly a teaspoon. All right. Putting my lid back on, I'm going to mute myself again, and I'm going to step behind me to my blender and blend this. So I will be right back. All right, this is looking good. Taking my lid off. And again, because we had some dry ingredients, sometimes it gets caught along the side. So just going in with my spatula, giving it another good stir. I'm going to add my chocolate chips. The batter is somewhat thick, but not too thick. But I have found a trick when working with muffins and or mini muffin tins. We are actually going to put our batter in a little baggie. I have just a gallon Ziploc bag here. I have it resting. I took the corner, shoved the corner down into the cup, opened it up, and I'm actually going to scoop the batter into this, and then I'm going to cut the tip off and kind of pipe it into the muffin tin bag. That's going to help reduce the mess in the transfer. I have driven myself crazy trying to put in the batter into the muffin tins in a very clean way. Never works out. So I have found that using a little bag as a piping bag works best. All right, mixing in some of my chocolate chips. Gonna come in with my bag. I like to leave a little chocolate chips for sprinkling on the top before I bake them to give them that bakery fresh look. And also to make sure that I have, chocolate chips on the top as well. All right. Sometimes if you have a bowl, that works too, but something that just stands up will help. I always have canned pumpkin puree on hand. Honestly, any time of the year, but especially in the fall weather for all my fall baking. But I do like to use canned pumpkin for other things. And if you're someone like me who might find a recipe that only uses half of a can and you think, now what? Am I going to waste this? I usually put the top, when I open the can, put the top back in here to kind of help create a seal. Um, but what I've done in the past as well is I have used ice cube trays to make little frozen pumpkin ice cubes. That way that they stay fresh longer, and then I will get them out and let them defrost in another baking recipe. I have used them to put into my dog's food, especially if it's the 100% pure pumpkin without the added sugar. Our furry friends can enjoy some of that. Um, I have also found that sometimes I just like to double the recipe and get rid of the canned pumpkin as well. I mean, who wouldn't love a little extra muffins? Canned pumpkin is a really great addition to our baked goods and some recipes as well. Like you can add it to your pasta sauces, you can add it to casseroles, you can add it to creamy sauces. Um, Really, really great in nutrients. It is high in fiber, and that's going to help keep us regular and encourage a healthy gut. It's also really high in vitamin A, and that's going to come from beta carotene, and we can see that in that potent orange color. And that vitamin A is going to support vision health, skin health, as well as our immune function. It's also going to be a source of vitamin K, which is essential for our bone and blood health. As I mentioned, this is a good source of fiber. About half of a cup of the canned puree is going to give us around 3 to 4 grams of fiber. All right. So I have my oven preheated to 350, bringing in my muffin tin. I'm going to give it a quick spray. I just have this extra virgin olive oil avocado spray. Whatever spray you have will do. Giving it a nice spray here, especially since I'm using mini muffin tins and not using any liners. All right. I'm going to cut the tip of this. Better pick up that chocolate chip. All right. I am going to cut this tip. All right, going to go right in. Start squeezing. I have tried using little tablespoons, spoons, measuring cups. I've tried many ways of transferring batter from the dish that it was prepared in to the tin, and I always make a mess. So this has been my saving grace. Just squeeze. I like to do my mini muffins about 3/4 to the way full. They will bake up. I have some extra dough. All right, I'm gonna see if some of them look a little less full. They look pretty good. Easy peasy, right? All right, I still have some extra batter. I'm gonna just put it to the side here because I do only have one muffin tin. I'm gonna come in and sprinkle some more on the top. Again, it's gonna give you that bakery style look. And we're gonna make sure we have enough chocolate chips. These muffins are a really great on-the-go breakfast. You're getting whole grains and fiber from the oat flour. We are getting more fiber from our pumpkin. I have semi-sweet chocolate chips here. So not too terribly high in those added sweeteners. And my baking tip is sometimes when I make things like muffins or cookies, I just cut back the sugar ever so slightly. So this one called for 3/4 cup. I actually did about a half of a cup instead of 3/4 because I was working with pumpkin. Pumpkin's going to add moisture. Sugar also is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture and allows our baked goods to be nice and moist. But because I was working with something like pumpkin that's already going to add a lot of moisture, I felt pretty confident in cutting back that sugar because I want that pumpkin flavor to shine. Like I said, this would be a really great on the go breakfast for kids, for adults. I know those mini muffins are super popular. Think about how easy and nutrient dense and delicious this is to go ahead and make your family or yourself a batch of these with things that you might even have on hand. And you could put them in little individual baggies for a grab and go type breakfast. Great afternoon snack. I honestly sometimes after dinner, I love to have a sweet treat. This is my go-to recently. I'll have one or two little muffins, but they are the perfect size, perfect bite. They are going to go into the oven now for about 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in the oven now and set a timer for 15 minutes. All right, first recipe underway. How are we doing out there? Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat and I know we're recording, so if you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself, that's totally fine as well. We have a comment from my friend Deborah in the chat. She says silicone cups are such a nice idea. I always have the hardest time trying to put the paper ones in the cups. Yes, I agree, Deborah. That's why when I found this recipe and I saw mini muffins, I was like, oh, I love mini muffins, but I hate working with mini muffin tins. And I did some research into the silicone ones, and the cleanup is a breeze compared to the metal ones, and they work much better in my opinion. So really great addition to some, you know, my baking stash. Oh, absolutely, Kelly. Kelly says loving the nutritional info. Absolutely, Kelly. That's what these classes are for. We are taking delicious treats and recipes and we are translating them into feasible ways for you to make them, but also sharing some nutrition tips along the way. All right, my friends, now we are going to make our caramel sauce. I fell in love with this recipe when I tested it a few weeks ago. I love a caramel apple, from the grocery store, but I personally sometimes struggle with how hard the caramel gets or sometimes the flavor of the caramel. I love that this just has ingredients that I already had on hand. We are using maple syrup, honey, and some heavy cream. This has been the most, I think, flavorful caramel apple I've ever had. But I will tell you when I made this the first time, the caramel did not set as thick as I would have liked. So I ended up making it into a dip. So if this needs to turn into a dip, that's where we're really adaptable here. I like to make things simple, but I love the flavor of these. It's absolutely phenomenal. The recipe also has you um, drizzle some melted chocolate and some salt. I'm not going to do that today just because I'm going to pivot if I need to in order to make this a dip, but you can add those as toppings as well. Um, I like to, when my nieces and nephews come over, make it a dip, and then we have like little chocolate chips. We have sprinkles so they can dip their apple wedge in the caramel and then kind of dip in their topping of choice. So you can kind of make this work however you want. I went ahead and I added my maple syrup to the pot. I'm going to go in with my honey. I will tell you, I took some cooking oil and I sprayed into this before I poured the honey in to help it fall out better. I'm going to come in with my whisk and see if I can pull the rest down. Might need to grab my rubber spatula. There we go. All right. Was about a cup of maple syrup, a half a cup of honey, and we're going to go in with about 3/4 a cup of heavy cream. This is what's going to give that color, the caramel color. And truly, caramel is just made from granulated sugar, but this is just a different take that adds so much flavor. I love maple. I love honey. Adding the heavy cream gives it that creaminess. You'll be surprised how simple and how delicious this caramel is. All right, now the goal here is we are going to let this boil. When we are allowing this to boil, this is where that issue of whether or not this is going to stick really well to my apples comes in or not. When you have something with these these are all sugar. They are different types of sugar. That white sugar is a refined carbohydrate. These are naturally occurring sugars. So these technically have no added sugar, but they are sources of sugar, just as a normal caramel apple. So the goal here is that we're looking for this chemical reaction that's going to reduce this. Some of this is the water will evaporate, making this thicker, but we have to be very careful to not cook it at a higher temp for too long, because then it'll kind of crystallize and it'll get into that almost like rock hard candy when it gets cool. So roughly 8 to 10 minutes of boiling is that sweet spot. Some folks, I think I boiled mine for about 13 or 14 minutes and it still didn't overly harden. So I think it just depends how aggressively you're boiling, your type of pot, all the things. Nonetheless, it's still delicious. It's just important to know that sometimes it might not work out the correct way that you're anticipating it to work out. Totally fine. You're still going to have a delicious end product. My plug-in burner here sometimes takes a bit to heat up, so we'll just have to wait patiently for that to heat up. And I will bring in my apples, and I will show you all my makeshift sticks. My makeshift sticks. I was having car troubles, and I was unable to go to the store to look for popsicle sticks, so I used reusable straws. I have some plastic ones on hand. You could use forks. I just kind of gently shove them in there. This is just really helpful when you're dipping them in there. Works perfectly for me. Work with what you got. All right, I also have my tray here lined with some parchment paper because this will get really sticky. Just checking the chat here. Bree says, I love the method of using the bag instead of the spoon. I agree, Bree. I think once you kind of go that route, it makes this a breeze. I used to get really overwhelmed by making muffins and all of those things because of that reason. So this tends to really lighten that load. I am starting to see some bubbles break the surface. Perfect. All right, now we wait. And we have about 8 minutes left on the timer for our pumpkin muffins. If anyone is a Harry Potter fan, this recipe reminds me, and the smell reminds me of like you're making a homemade butterbeer. Really, really delicious. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about refined carbohydrates and sugar since we are making caramel apples. Oh, absolutely, Kelly. Yes. So I'm going to take a quick pause on that and talk about the ingredients in this real quick. So we have about 1 cup of maple syrup, half of a cup of honey. And when I say maple syrup, pure maple syrup, make sure it's not like the pancake syrup that has high fructose corn syrup. We want 1 cup of pure maple, half a cup of honey, and 3/4 cup of heavy cream. Or if you want to go for a vegan recipe, you could do canned coconut cream. Also calls for half a teaspoon of vanilla bean powder. I personally do not have that, and I could not find that at any store that I am nearby. So I just skipped that. If you have vanilla bean powder, you could add that, but I think this is pretty great all on its own. All right, so now we're going to bring to a boil over high heat, and we're going to boil this for 10 to 12 minutes until thickened like caramel. I can see this is almost a little too high because it's rapidly boiling and climbing to the top. And as I keep an eye on this, I'm going to watch my muffins. I have about 6 minutes left on there. So that'll help remind me of how long this has been cooking. Cranked my heat back just a little bit. All right, so let's talk a little bit about simple sugars or carbohydrates. What we are making here is a caramel-like sauce for our apples. But because we are cooking with honey and maple syrup, those are sources of simple carbohydrates or quick energy, as I like to associate those words together. They are not complex carbohydrates. We are going to get some complex carbohydrates, meaning more larger molecules that will allow us to feel full longer and more sustained energy from our apple. So pairing this dip with something like an apple that has fiber in it is going to help keep our energy levels stable and also help our blood sugar not spike so aggressively. That's why, if you're someone who wants to enjoy a cookie after dinner, I really like to remind folks because they're so high in refined sugars and carbohydrates, pair it with a glass of milk, pair it with something like that protein. That's going to help not raise your blood sugar so intensely right away. But for this guy, we are going to come in with our apples that have fiber, which is awesome. If you wanted to pair some nuts, like some crushed peanuts on your apples, or even a little drizzle of almond butter or something like that, that'll add some protein and some fat to help keep your blood sugars more stable. But again, when you're enjoying a sweet treat, everything in moderation. So sometimes we don't have to get overly concerned with making this balance, but there are ways that we can treat our body with a little bit more kindness by maybe pairing our caramel sauce with a fiber-rich apple, sprinkling some nuts here. We are going to have less of an aggressive blood sugar spike because that heavy cream has so much fat in it, and it does have some protein as well. It's going to help versus it just being straight maple syrup or straight honey. All right. This is looking really great. This is a good type of boil, not climbing up so quickly. Smells phenomenal. I wish this was a candle smell. I had this on about medium heat for myself. And the key when this reduces or when it gets to that consistency of when you dip in a spoon and you turn it over and it looks like it coats the back, the key is that we're going to pour it into another bowl. I think that's what I've struggled with is that I left it in the hot pan that's meant to retain this heat. The stainless steel pan is really great at conducting heat and holding it, which didn't allow this to set. So I think the sweet spot here is pouring it into a heat safe dish. You could even pop it in the fridge for a few to kind of let it cool quicker. That's going to help it coat the apple quicker and better. All right, I'm going to let that just sit for a few minutes. I love to stir, but sometimes a overstirred pot will not reduce. So I'm going to put my whisk down. I'm actually going to just take a quick peek at our muffins to just make sure they're not over browning or none of them are popping out over the top too much. They look so good. So when they come out, I'm going to let them rest on the stovetop for a few minutes. Then I'm going to put them in a just like one of those cookie racks where they can cool off quicker. So I'll get one of those ready. This is what I mean by that. They sit a little higher up. They have these little edges that allow the air to kind of circulate underneath. If you don't have those, that's okay. But because we have chocolate chips on the top of that, you do just want to be careful that if you dump them out of their silicone container, the chocolate might be a little melty. If when you're making this, you want to go ahead and add toppings or ingredients, you can get those ready now. As I said, I'm just going to stick with coating them and see how it goes. And I'm going to move some of this stuff out of my workstation as I wait. I'm going to reduce the heat just a bit. Still boiling real well. We still have a few more minutes to go. I have 1 more minute left on my timer for my muffins. So since we are in this moment of waiting, does anyone have any questions for me in the chat or want to share any fall baking they have on their list that they're excited to do this month? Anything you're looking forward to making? Anything you're looking forward to cooking? All right, Deborah says, I'm going to an apple farm soon to get some fresh apples and pumpkin donuts. That sounds so fun, Deborah. I am so jealous. I hope the weather is nice for when you go and not 80 degrees like it's been here. It's been way too hot for that here. I love 80-degree weather, but when it's summer and I can go swimming. All right, that's our timer. I'm going to go ahead and pull those muffins out. All right, these are looking pretty good. I feel like I'm going to test them by doing the toothpick test, where you take a toothpick and put it in the middle and see if it comes out clean. So let me put these down and grab a toothpick. All right, so I took this little food fork that's like a toothpick and I stuck it through the middle of one, and you can see that it came out without any actual residue. There's a little bit obviously from sticking it in there, but it's not like wet batter, so that tells me that it's all cooked the whole way through. I'm going to set these muffins on that cooling rack for now and give it a few, and then I'll go back in and pop them out. All right, and I saw we had a question come in the chat. All right, so Kelly says, can you tell us about your pivot? Yes, Kelly, I can. And I'm assuming we're talking about the caramel apple pivot. What I ended up doing eventually is, because when I got this off the heat, I let it sit on my trivet for about 5 minutes. I went in and I coated my apple, and it was thick, but because it was so warm, it just ran right off. I was being pretty impatient, and I left it in this pot, which the recipe very clearly says to take out and put in a heat-proof bowl. I think that was my big mistake. But because it didn't stick to these, what I ended up doing was I then left it in this pot. After it cooled down completely for the rest of the night, I put it in the fridge. And then the next day, I kind of like, it was almost like the consistency of peanut butter. Then I was able to spoon it on the apples. But if I wouldn't have held on to it and gave up, I am sure that it might not have worked out very well. But I will say that sometimes if you overcook this, once it sets, it won't be viscous like honey or like that peanut butter. It can almost like harden like rock candy. So that's where there's that fine line of and you won't know till it completely sets, maybe the next day in the fridge. But there's that fine line of not knowing whether or not it's going to actually get just like thick and hard. If you're too worried about cooking it for too long and you want to keep it as like spreadable as you can like err on the side of more of that 10 minutes, which right now I think we're at that 10 minutes of it boiling. And you can put it in that heat-proof bowl. And you can even try to coat your apples. If it doesn't work, just serve it as a dip. Wish I had a more concrete answer of how to avoid that, but honestly, there's a lot of factors that go into play for things like that. One of the things that can affect a boiling point, which is the point at which something boils, is crazy enough as elevation. And I live on top of a mountain. So the town I used to live in, I'm now like 1,200 feet above where I was before. And I've noticed things boil a lot quicker here, which I think should be the opposite, but it just impacts cooking time. So that's just something to be aware of. All right, this is looking really great. We're going to go ahead and pour it in this bowl so it can start cooling down. Beautiful. Put a spoon in, and it is coating the back of a spoon. All right, because I know that when this cooled down more, it worked a lot better. I'm going to pop it in my fridge for a bit. We got some time here. Or if you really want, you could even pop it in your freezer. But just being mindful not to do it for too terribly long because we don't want it to harden too quick. All right, let's take a peek at our muffins. These are looking really great. The silicone is just a smidge warm, not too terribly warm. All right, folks, I just got a message from one of our participants who is trying to get into the event. So just bear with me as I email her back real quick. See if maybe she can capture the end of class. And then we'll get our muffins out. Is anyone inspired to make these muffins at home? Throw it in the chat. Let me know if you're now inspired to do these muffins or if you're inspired to do the apples. I think I've never made my own caramel apples until I found this recipe. Because making caramel sometimes can be really tedious as it requires very temperature specific things. Sometimes it requires a thermometer, a special thermometer. All right, I went ahead and sent that to her. Yay, awesome. Deborah and Bree will be making both, and I'm sure some of you out there are also inspired. That's why you're here, right? These sounded like fun recipes and to learn something new. All right, so you can go ahead and pop them out. Like I said, you could dump them on the counter. They'll slide right out like they are for me. But the tops of my muffins, my chocolate is real melty, so I don't want that to go everywhere. These muffins are so cute. They remind me of those little mini muffins. My one nephew loves them. They are his favorite thing to have for breakfast. And I think this is a great recipe. We can add a little bit more nutrition. Getting some great things like that pumpkin. Even if you have a mini muffin tin, you could do like a pumpkin nut muffin, the same recipe, or you could do other muffin recipes as well. You could do like an oat blueberry. I am getting the melted chocolate all over, but I'm just popping them up from the top. This is the bad thing when you're working with chocolate. This was a metal tin. I would be so overwhelmed to clean this, but honestly, I just take a sponge and it because it's so it moves so easy, it's really easy. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the sink. Set these to the side. They are still cooling. What do we think? How cute. We could do a quick taste test together. So here's a little muffin. Let's open it up. Beautiful. So moist. Perfect amount of chocolate. Pumpkin chocolate chip is my absolute favorite. Perfect, perfect. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick and then I'll pull the caramel out and we'll see if it's ready. All right, this is looking good. Still think it might need another moment or so. So hang tight. All right, getting the rest of the chocolate out of my fingers. Oh, great. I missed some things in the chat. Let me just take a quick peek. Well, that's a great idea, Deborah. Sprinkling them with some orange and black sprinkles. Kristen said, making muffins now. Can't wait to try apples next. Just picked some yesterday. Yay! And yes, they are gluten-free as well, but I will warn folks who may have an allergy to gluten to always check your oats to be sure that they are 100% gluten-free. Sometimes oats can be processed in a facility that also processes things with gluten. So if you're someone with an allergy, I do always recommend that you double check that they're gluten-free certified. We want to avoid that cross-contamination. All right, here we're going to try our first bout. This is definitely still pretty liquidy, but that's okay. Sometimes it takes a few rounds. Just rolling it around in here. All right. Sticking to the apple, which is a good sign, but it's not super thickly coated, but that's okay. As it cools down, it will be thicker, so this is great. Beautiful. So it is 6:47. I realistically will share with you all, I think this is going to need 15, 20 minutes to sit and really cool. But I went ahead and did that first coat with you to show you how it's sticking to these apples. Anything that's warm like this will just slide right off, but you can see that thickness is there to nicely coat the apples, which is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and grab a little knife. I'm going to cut a piece off and we're going to do a taste test together because I think we're all going to be in our own journey with these apples. So if some of us even need to wait for a few hours for it to cool completely, we might, but let me grab an apple and we'll do a taste test together. This may be where you just serve it as a dip once it's cooled. So I don't know if you can see how it's still coated. Looks really great. Let's go in for our taste test. These get better every time I make them. Yeah, these are perfect. Perfect flavor. Just gonna need to work on the consistency here. And as I coat the back of my wooden spoon, it is sticking, which tells me when this cools down a bit more, it'll be perfect. If you want to even, like I said, use this as a dip, it should cool off and get a little thicker, but perfect. If you're making these with friends or family, I would definitely recommend making the caramel like a few hours before, just so that way it's set and then you can decorate right after. Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. I'm so happy you could come to class. All right, before everyone hops off, I do want to put a quick survey in the chat. And I just want to thank WellSense for sponsoring today's class. And to please check our check our class calendar for some upcoming classes. And I'm going to go ahead and end our recording now, so that way folks can ask questions if they'd like.